Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join me, Jack Stafford, a student of metaphysics, as I talk to a variety of guests to better understand the teachings given by the masters through the Aetherius Society, the new cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, incorporating all yogas, Christian mysticism, theosophy, UFOs, and much, much more. Please note that this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, my guest is Dr. Mark Weisman. Hello. Hello, Mark.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
It's great you could be here. You're in Alaska, yeah?
I am. Land of the midnight sun.
Whereabouts in Alaska?
I'm in what's called South Central. So if you hold your hand up, let's see if I can do this. I'm not used to doing it backwards. So this would be the Aleutian chain.
Mm-hmm.
This is the body of Alaska. This would be the Beaufort Sea up top here. I'm right about here.
Where's Anchorage?
It's right about here. That's where I am.
Oh, okay. I've been there. I've driven around Anchorage and
yes,
Alaska before.
that's where I am. I'm here in Anchorage, South Central Anchorage.
Okay, great. But are you originally from there? Maybe you could just tell us a bit about yourself to introduce yourself.
Actually, no, I was born on the East Coast many moons ago. My father was a land surveyor, so we traveled around a lot. We moved from Ohio kind of back east, lived in New Jersey for a while. Then my father got a position in Taft, Louisiana, where he was a land surveyor. So he was surveying the grounds to put the nuclear power plant there at Taft. And so we lived there until the real construction began. And then we moved from Taft, Louisiana to Tucson, Arizona, where I kind of finished out my schooling and left for the military.
Oh, okay. So you have a military background.
A little, yes.
Where did you serve? Where did you go up to?
I was in the Marines. I served a horrible duty out there in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. So, just suffrage, suntans, surfing. After I left the military, I went into private security. That was pretty much the only career option. And became maritime security. I did that for many years until meeting the most wonderful person in the world. And she born me 5 children and moved us to Alaska, where we have been now for 27 years. So we've been here a while.
And you have your own podcast, Alaska. You have to help me with the pronunciation here.
Ulfhednar.
Okay, I wouldn't have got that.
The D is a horrible representation of the Old Norse D, which is actually pronounced as a TH.
Okay.
And then the F, of course, when sounding it out, comes out as a V in Old Norse. So it's Ulfhednar.
And so how do you get into the Norse in the South?
Well, my family, my father's family goes back about 18 generations in northern Germany and all the way through northern Denmark. So I have a pretty stored history there and throughout that lands. And then recently, I'd say recently, decade or so, my mother kind of reignited that connection by doing some genealogy and some history work. And of course, me being the student I am, immediately dove in, probably way too deep, and traveled back in time to before Denmark, to a German tribe, the Danes, which would go on to become Denmark. But back when they were the Danes in the Germanic area, they were Celtic. Because most of those Germanic tribes brought the Celt part with them from Gaul and the more Western Europe, kind of migrated east and then north to become what is known as Denmark today.
Okay. And so how do you use this ancient wisdom in modern life?
Well, there's a lot of ways. It comes in quite a different a variety of ways. Most prominent, I would say, is identifying the simplicity in our lives, trying to move aside all the hustle and bustle of modern day life and kind of simplify things, kind of slow them down so that it gives people some time to process. Probably second to that would then be using a very prominent mindset of my ancestors, and that was living intentionally. They believed, as I do, that there are two paths in life. One is ruled by the fates, and the fates just kind of, it was an existence, but that's all it was. It didn't give the burning desires of love and all of the high emotion that life can offer us. And then the other path, of course, is the one that we choose, and that's called free will. And free will allows us to essentially be the master of our ship, to to drive our life, to not accept uh, just whatever happens, not having that victim mentality, but actually living intentionally, doing what we need to do intentionally. And that was kind of those two paths. And so kind of taking that and helping people to understand that when we are working at clearing these thoughts out of our mind and these emotional kind of nuggets hanging out in the background there, we need to focus on that. We need to um, um, do that intentionally and clear and get to a place where we have a clear mind, where we can, embrace whatever spirituality appeals to us intrinsically, through our mind and through our hearts, but getting to the place where we can actually recognize it for what it is. And so those are probably be the two biggest things we talk about with these members. What I work a lot with service members is, what we have is we have this internal guilt that has been more or less programmed into us from pre-birth. As we've listened to our mother and our father speak, we start getting these thoughts, and those are implanted in our brains as we grow, depending on the level of influence our parents have. We More and more of this guilt is kind of put in place, and then when we turn 18, we're shipped off to war, and we view things and we see things, and we have to, in some cases, do things that goes 180 degrees contrary to everything that we've been taught since before we were born. And so there's a lot of emotional triggering going on because we've got these emotional memories from that those inadvertent programming when we were children, to now having to reconcile the acts of war. And so trying to do that and helping people to understand how to do that, and to do it intentionally. Drive the ship, don't let it drive you. So giving back that control.
Really valuable is because such as underlying there's a so much lack of spirituality in modern world. And that's, people replace that with alcohol. I mean, when I was in Alaska, there was a big part of everyday life, especially with the indigenous people as well. It was rough.
It very much is. And what we find is we have two kind of categories. Is we have one group of people who seek any company, they seek other people and other groups to make sure that they feel included.
Mm,
They need that inclusion. And what many people overlook, if you will, is that if they could recenter their focus, they would find that the spirituality can give them that. They can provide the wholeness and the oneness that they're looking for. and so we don't wind up getting drawn into bad crowds and the issues. The drinking and the drugs and those reckless behaviors or destructive behaviors, um, those can kind of come in two flavors, and I personally have experienced that when I wore a much younger man's clothes. I spent a lot of time on a self-destructive track because being an empath, one is kind of overwhelmed with emotion and feelings from other people, and you don't know what to do with it. And you wind up feeling just overwhelmed kind of all the time. And so many people, myself included, turned to other chemicals in an attempt to kind of stem that down. And it, knowing what I know now, I was just making the situation 100 times worse. But of course, during those days, if we only had future sight.
Mm. Yeah, I hear that from many empaths and psychics that they don't know other people don't have these abilities, so they don't know that's not normal. So yeah, they get sucked into other people's lower behavior.
Yes, yes, and again, it's overwhelming because here you're trying to deal with your reaction to their emotion and their emotion at the same time. So
Mm.
you're getting the double whammy, if you will.
What kind of experiences did you have as you were developing?
I went through the alcohol and ultimately wound up overdosing on heroin.
Oh wow! But I mean more of the spiritual abilities or the empathy. What?
And and that's just it. I never recognized, it wasn't until many years later that I had hindsight that I was kind of explained what was going on. Um, During those days, to me, my mind, I just always seemed to be, I could never shut my mind up. I could never stop and just be calm and be still and let it all go away. I couldn't do that. Even when I was laying down to sleep, there were random thoughts going through my head and random feelings that I was feeling, and I didn't know why. And so it was overwhelming is, I guess, the best way to put it, because you can't get it to stop.
But did so you went into meditation and trance work?
Later, I learned to meditate and to actually regain center. But during those times, um, it, there was a lot of pride as well. And so you didn't want to be seen as weak, which was kind of another, lack of a better phrase, another pathway that led to that type of destructive behavior, is because that's what real men do. And it's silly, but and I deal with it even today. Is people who they have they have a sense of self-worth that is just misguided. It misunderstands why it's got this defensive mode up for whatever reason. So we have to go in and it takes a lot of time. I was working with a young man and I was teaching him to meditate. And for the first couple of weeks, he struggled with it. And he kept saying, "Oh, this is so silly. Oh, this is so silly. I feel so silly." And what it was is that was pride and that was ego, kind of trying to say, "No, don't do this because it's going to fix things inevitably." But he struggled with it for quite some time until he was able to finally figure out that I wasn't pulling his leg and I wasn't making him go search for something that wasn't really there. I think once, his confidence in me, we did a couple of meditative sessions together where I showed him, went through the motions with him. So I think, eventually we got past it and he was able to kind of recenter and find himself. And a lot of times you get to that place where you do find yourself and you're not too impressed with what you find. And so there's the other avenue, if you will, to where you kind of lead almost into a depressive state where drugs and alcohol can again kind of surface their heads.
So for you, you went up a mountain for a year. You'd already detached, or do you think?
I did. I lived on the side of a mountain. I was homeless, and so I was able to secure a two-man tent, a sleeping bag, and I went to a park there in the Catalina Mountains, just north of Tucson, and I lived there for a year.
That was a. Do you think you have to hit rock bottom before you can really begin?
I think there are some people who need that. Yes, it's like some people need a 2x4 sometimes against the forehead. I think there are certain cases where, yeah, extremes are necessary, but for the most part, if we can put down the pride, put down the ego, and find that centering and be able to refocus ourselves, clear away those emotional landmines, if you will, in the back of our minds, be able to focus, we can do it without hitting rock bottom, which is much more safe.
Most of the people who I speak to on this show are kind of the elder women of the village, of the global village. But it's great to have a role model such as yourself, because I'm sure when young men to come to get introduced to you, they can see you've got all the tats, you've been in the army, you've been around the world, you've seen the other side of the tracks, so to speak.
I most certainly have, and I prefer to be on this side now.
And so you can talk their language, though. You know how to get them across the tracks.
I do, and that's one of the things that I have found as I've started really speaking with others, is my ability to go back there. And now for me to go back there and speak of the heroin overdose, or speak of my alcoholic days, or my self-destructive behaviors on fast motorcycles, or whatever it was, I don't have the guilt or shame or none of those things, because I understand what it was. And it was learning. It was to teach me what I needed to know. And I have secured that knowledge now. So
and
hopefully I can pass it on.
And are you an ordained Christian minister as well?
I was, yes. I have since left. I am pretty much a full-time shaman now.
Okay. Nordic shaman.
I am.
Because that's always Celtic. Yeah, because I always think of South America now with that. But because with this globalization of culture, we seem to have lost these, and then it's kind of sucked the spirituality of it, because we don't have these people to look up to in locally who are into, the vicar in the village used to be, in England when I was growing up, used to be a central figure. But now, because we're all turning outwards, we're missing that role models.
Agreed. And I think that's everywhere, though. One of the things I was just speaking with another person today, and I was telling them, we're seeing, I think, numbers in mass today of people who are searching for answers. They have no idea really the questions yet. They're just seeking for change. And we see kind of across the globe right now, for one reason or another, we're finding the Norse or the Viking culture really surfacing again, and bringing to the forefront their polytheistic beliefs. We're seeing quite a bit of that, numbers migrating to that practice, if you will.
What does that mean again? Polytheistic?
Polytheistic would mean multiple gods.
Okay. All right.
Whereas monotheistic would be just one god. And then atheistic, or atheism, would be no gods.
Okay. Right. That's good.
So
I think you're not throwing about a number of wives here.
yeah, exactly. And again, we see the other big migration right now is Southeast Asia, which is in mass coming to monotheistic beliefs from their previous polytheistic beliefs,
Mm.
or a couple others. There's a couple animist beliefs down there. We also, if you start moving further, what would that be? Further west, you arrive with Buddhism, Confucianism, and those. But we're seeing a mass enrollment in the monotheistic practices in Southeast Asia, like numbers we've never seen. So something is moving in the world. One of the other things I've noticed just here in the United States is a huge uptick, for lack of a better word, uptick in indigenous subscriptions, where people are starting to come back and starting to remember Mother Earth and the spirits and the realms from those beliefs. So we're seeing large numbers of people going there too.
That really resonates with me. Yeah, the American Indians, I mean, they worshipped everything. Now there was a spirit for everything, and that's really what resonates with me. Also, from the teachings from the Aetherius Society, there is the one God. There is everything, which is God. There, and that's only a small part of what God is. Everything in manifestation, but then there's all these individuals on their way back to God. The nature spirits, the everything.
Everything. And
Yeah,
ultimately you are a spiritual self
right.
wrapped in a physical a body for a physical lifetime to learn your emotional journey. And then you will depart this physical body and join our ancestors. And those we're finding, just in what we've just said, really is the message that I'm trying to convey everywhere. And that is, ultimately, I subscribe, for lack of a better description, to the Celtic Norse beliefs. So it's more Celtic than it is Norse, but there's a lot of Norse in my beliefs. I have a lot of very good friends who are from a multitude of tribes throughout the United States, a couple of tribes in Altai, on the Altai steppes in Mongolia. And then I have other friends who are two ladies who are Vidal priestesses down in Louisiana, where I lived. And as we start talking about spirituality, not as much in theology, there's a lot of differences there, but we start talking about spirituality, and you talk about spiritual entities and spiritual forces and spiritual energies and our ancestors and how all of that comes together to kind of encourage and foster our growth and our physical lives, to help us get better and grow and learn and live. We find that belief across the board.
Mm.
No one has that. If you look at Vidal, or I guess Americans call it voodoo, but Vidal, centralized God, that's a monotheistic practice that believes in an afterlife and spiritual life.
Mm.
So it recognizes all the spirits of the land. It recognizes spirits within others. It demonstrates the belief in ancestral spirits. All of those things, you take that same idea right there, lift it up, carry it over a whole lot of miles, and drop it onto Japan, and you can study the yokai, which is the animus of Japan. Same beliefs. They're almost identical. And then pick that up, drag it south a couple hundred miles, and drop it into the Aboriginal people of Australia, and while they were place, they kind of go along with the native beliefs, particularly here in Native Americas, but where the earth is the center of their world. The center of life is the earth. The Native Americans referred to her as Mother Earth. The Aboriginal people, is earth is center in their practice. And then you pick that up and drop it in the middle of Europe, and you find in Celtic beliefs where we have what's referred to as the green world. The green world is the earth. So this is the commonality that I find in spirituality. And when we get past all the labels and the pretense and the pomp and circumstance, we arrive at what I refer to as the universal truth. And the universal truth speaks that, love is the most powerful energy in the universe. It permeates everything. And that there are spiritual entities around us every day, every minute of every day, that are here, and all they want to do is help us grow, help us get through our emotional challenges, that we may come to our emotional control. Because one day, when my physical body fails and my spirit departs my physical body, for me to be able to help others, my descendants, I must have empathy for them. I must be able to feel their pain or their confusion or their sorrow, that I can offer advice and give them suggestions and nudges in the right direction to help get them back on their tracks. Because I won't have all these physical sensories that I have now. You can't see, you can't smell, you can't hear, none of that. And I don't have all the chemicals flooding my body. And what I mean by chemicals is not the bad kind, but the good kinds. And they're called hormones. Everyone's got them. Matter of fact, if you don't have them, you make them. Hormones are the body's way to alter its energy set, if you will. So if our visual input says, oh my God, this is really scary, our brain then activates a hormone called adrenaline, floods the system, fires up our muscles, gets our heart beating faster, palms sweat, lungs breathe in more air, our eyes become more acute. Everything kind of comes together. Once the situation ends, we're then given our serotonin levels kind of rise to now lower the adrenaline levels. So these are chemistry going on in your body. That chemistry has been proven to alter your DNA of who you are, making you incredibly more unique than you originally ever thought you were. Because we start our life at the moment of conception as a combination between mom and dad. There's some decisions that are made regarding the dominant and recessive gene set. Everybody throws up a coin and winner comes out, because sometimes we see recessive genes come up. Most of the time we see dominant genes come up. You're formed. And from that moment, the chemistry of you is changing your DNA from that moment for eternity, until you leave your physical body. Once you leave your physical body, that's it. You're done altering, because ultimately you don't have DNA either. But that's kind of how that works. And when we talk about these spiritual events that happen in our lives, most people discount them as, I've heard one person tell me that it was the reset of the matrix, because caught a glimpse, something out of the corner of his eye, turned to look, nothing there. Later, heard something. Searched the whole house for something that it could have been. Nothing there. Later, felt someone press by him. Actually felt a presence move behind him and more or less brush against him. Nobody in the house. Of course, he's panicking, thinking he's going crazy. And I told him, no, what this is your spiritual influences that are around you communicate with you. And instead of having a direct wire into the brain, your spiritual senses ride on your physical sensory input. So in many cases, you'll see, hear, smell, or taste, or even feel something and go, what's that about? That's the brain interpreting this signal that it just received from a spiritual energy over your physical sensory input into the brain. Because remember, the brain's a black box. I mean, it's a black, empty box when you're born. And there's 5 hoses plugged into that box. And those 5 hoses are literally your 5 senses. That's the only way to get data into that box is from those 5 sources. So when you think about your knowledge and your intelligence and even your wisdom, all of that is because those 5 sensories inputs allow data into your brain. And then you will then build, as one data point lands into the brain, you then web it out in these what's called a related or associated field. And so all the brain memories are then connected. And so in many cases, this is some of the things we were talking earlier about with the service members, is trying to figure out, are we on the original emotional memory, or are we on a related? Are we talking about something that's related to the original? And so we got to kind of play this pin the tail on the donkey as we move around all these painful memories to get down to the one that's actually the one that needs to be resolved. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot view.
That's great. Just going back to what you said earlier about all these different um, religions and the spiritual beliefs, kind of cookie cutter, that they believe in the sacred and the Mother Earth. And like, for example, in the Aetherius Society, we also say that the Mother Earth is the most holy, the most spiritual being you've ever physically touched, is the ground beneath your feet. And
Absolutely agreed. And I have a belief that that part of us is born in the spiritual realm. We inherit a physical body for a physical lifetime, and then we'll depart. We'll leave that physical body and then return to the spiritual realm where we will reside for eternity. My friend, who, as I mentioned, is one of the tribes in Saskatchewan, and he believes that we come from the earth, we live our lives, and we return to the earth. And so we were talking about this, and the idea is, could conceptually Mother Earth, the green earth, or the green world, however you want to refer to her, could that be the spiritual realm that I know? The ideas are the same. We come from it, we live, we go back to it. So could the earth be the spiritual realm? I believe it could. Absolutely. And so all too often, many are so, I don't want to say driven, but they seem to focus more on the differences of practice and beliefs, and they really focus their attention on the differences. And my hope is to say, no, take away those things that someone wanted to use to separate us, and find how I, as a Celtic Norse, can can sit in a room full of men in the middle of their seminary and have a decent conversation and find commonality amongst that group of men, and um, seeking the unification of people is, to me, more important than identifying the differences.
That's beautiful. Yeah, because I sometimes feel that, I have access to all this truth and everyone should know about it. And, you know, my truth's better than your truth. And, you know, and so I really hear you that. But at the same time, I've got many voices in the head. Another one saying, if we shine the light into the dark and we know that we have this information, like, because if you believe in reincarnation, like you just said, that you go back to spirit world for eternity, like, does that, so Valhalla, is that
Um, the nine realms are, I think that was man's interpretation.
okay? But then you go back to spirit world forever, so you only have this one.
Maybe you know, you could recycle if for example your life was cut short for
Mm,
an accident or something, and you weren't able to accomplish emotional control, and
mm,
you couldn't get to a level where you could do empathy blind,
mm,
as I call it. If you don't feel like you're ready to be of any value to
mm,
your ancestors, or to your descendants rather, then do it again.
mm.
Maybe pick something different this time. Last time I was an elephant. This time I'm a human. Next time maybe I'll be a blade of grass.
But this,
I
but
don't
what,
know.
but with this, because from the Aetherius Society we get taught that, maybe I could just explain it a little bit, because if I've had the feeling that if everyone knew about evolution, spiritual evolution, you wouldn't have any. If you know that you're in constant reincarnation, yeah, I'm coming back. I'm coming. That really does change the way you plant a tree. You know, I'm gonna sit in next time I come back, I'm gonna be sitting under that tree, or I'm not gonna destroy this land because I'm coming back. And if it could be open to misinterpretation if you think I'm going back to spirit world forever or I'm going into the earth forever. There's this, even spiritual people have this kind of selfish motivation. You can crack through it by knowing that you're in a cycle. No?
Well, the thing that I think we also need to draw a very sharp idea around is this idea that only during your physical existence does the concept of time and space matter. It's only while we're in this physical body that that even applies. Once we become spiritual, we could go back through another physical lifetime, and it would be like a weekend holiday,
Mm,
or what we would call a weekend holiday for us today. So, whether we choose to recycle and live again, or back here on the physical plane, or whether we decide that we are of a benefit to our descendants from our spiritual realm, using
mm,
our empathy and the nudging and the suggestions and all the benefits that we can use. Um, whether but we can make that decision. That's a
mm,
choice that we can make, and we get to make that choice.
mm.
So we could decide that, yeah, I'm just not ready yet.
Well, your higher self makes the choice, not you. Your
Well,
higher self knows what's good for you.
well,
Conscious me would be sitting, drinking beer, watching Netflix, and
right.
uh,
Well, when I speak of me, although I am a spiritual being inside a physical being, to me, we are one.
okay,
I am more focused on my spiritual me than I am
right.
on my physical
You're not the
me.
everyman.
So,
But without doing exactly what you said about focusing on the differences, I just wanted to focus on that and for a
no,
moment,
that's fine.
and just say, because we go from rock to plant, to insect, to animal, and then to man, where we are now. And we can't go backwards, according to my teachings, because you've reached this level of consciousness. It wouldn't be advantageous. You can be of more service to the rest of the world and to all the other beings if you advance and you keep, because you've got this. You can be a better help to the animals in a human body than if you were not born as a dog in the next life. So there's this evolution and as we go further and as we get cosmic ascension, cosmic consciousness ascension, then we live on other planets, and then we merge ourselves with other souls vibrating in the same way, and eventually, through millions of we get to form planets, and so the Mother Earth is an amalgamation of people, millions of lives more evolved than us merged together. So this is the kind of the idea of a planetary consciousness is so far beyond. But even the Mother Earth is still can't go back to God, because she has to eventually become a sun, merge with other planets. Suns have to become galaxies, and even galaxies can't go back to God because they haven't transmuted matter. So there's this whole spiritual evolutionary process to go back to the source. And so all these people, all these gods above us are in service to everyone below them, and just keeping the whole cycle going. So
And you will find, as we look at our two beliefs, there are so many commonalities amongst them. And I'm very intrigued. I will have to do some more reading. Now that you've got me on this path, I'm going to love reading. But ultimately, the idea is, my goal is to help people break down the divisions, break down the dividers, stop looking for those, find the commonalities, and embrace that commonality.
that's a great message. Yeah. Yeah.
And the more we can do that, I think, we can get away from these silly beliefs that, a person's sex or a person's skin color or a person's religion or the person's political party matters.
Well, that also going back to reincarnation. If I was a black woman in the last life, and life before that I was a Chinese man. Next life I'm going to be a Jewish transsexual. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, if we take you, not the you everyone sees, but you as the spiritual being
Mhm.
you're formless. Some may say you're invisible,
Mm.
but your spiritual center, your spiritual self has no form, doesn't need it, doesn't need arms and legs and neck and or eyebrows. It doesn't need all those things. So when we peel away all of what we would refer to as humanity and we boil ourselves down to our spiritual entities, we're all identical.
With divine sparks of the Almighty. Yeah.
So it's just trying to find those commonalities and helping people understand that, I hear all the time the word tolerance, and that word actually pushes every button I have, because I don't tolerate anyone. I accept them or I don't. I don't tolerate. That's such a horrible way, because it means that I'm having to temporarily reduce my standards to put up with this, to be in concert. Whereas if I said I'm accepting, that tells me, or it speaks volumes about really accepting them being different and being okay with them being different.
It's unconditional love, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is.
I mean, the greatest being in our concept of manifestation, doesn't leave some people in the dark, when they're walking down the street. It shines love on everyone.
Absolutely, 100% agreed. Absolutely perfect. That is exactly right. Yeah. And so trying to get people to understand that and put down their pride, put down their ego, and see past, unfortunately, there's been millennia of hard fences made
Mm.
that separate, and I mean, just looking at the evolution of the modern day monotheistic religion, you can see, all of the, the breaks. If we look at it, it looks like the roots on a tree, a really big tree. They're really going out there because there's just so many branches, and you go, why? Why is this? And we find one of the stories that I've told in the past is we look at, when the Europeans came to the Americas and conquered, and they destroyed the indigenous people on the lands, when in fact, had they sat at the table of brotherhood and learned and spoke of each other, they would have realized they both recognized the same deity. The the Europeans were coming over with their Christian mentality. The native tribes of the time was the great creator, the creator, the if they'd have sat down and it spoke to each other and said, well, I call him God, and I call him, and the other group said, well, we call him the creator. And both of them agreed that, it's okay to call an infinite being different names.
Mm. Mm.
Um, it's okay because in the big concept of things, you have an infinite being, a God, a deity. And whether you call him God or El Shaddai or Allah or Buddha or Confucius or whatever name, Bob, it's not the words, it's the spiritual backing of the word
Mm.
that means something to the deity. The name, it'd be like me calling you Mister. I'm not wrong. Would I call you that on the street? Probably not. But the idea is, we all too often we're too interested in labels, and labels divide.
Yeah.
They separate, and in many cases, as we saw through particularly American history, but even European history, many, 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 many people have paid the ultimate price for labels.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if you genuinely say you're a Christian or you're a Muslim or you're a Buddhist and you act like there is a supreme God, uh, and you just act in that be the best you can be, what a wonderful world we would live.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. 100%. I totally agree. And that's just it. And so trying to help people see past those labels and those dividers is
Mhm.
really my whole ambition.
Yeah.
Um, as I may have mentioned, I'm not sure, or if my staff mentioned that I do have a book coming out in May.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the turn to final, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm pretty proud of it because um, it takes the science. And so I talk about the hormones, the genetics, how that all interacts, and really take those two things and then a healthy dose of psychology, which is where we talk about those two things having an effect on our minds, or to what we understand or what we think we know, and then how spirituality plays into that whole mix there. And then kind of I do talk about the evolution of theology based on some of the practices, most of the practices that I've dealt with, dating back to about 196 to 200,000 years ago, kind of moving forward as we see the societies kind of pop up in all the different locations throughout the world. And particularly following the last glacier maximum, which was around 11,000 years ago, where you actually see the sea levels rise and the Beringia land bridge, of course, submerged. And it was about that time that humans had that paradigm shift from the hunter-gatherer over to the agriculture and herding mentality. So they kind of shifted their mind. Well, you kind of have to think about those things and say, okay, if my whole world depended on hunting and gathering, what cognitive ability would allow me to then say, if I just kept this stuff on hand, I'd be that much better ahead. I wouldn't have to go hunting in the winter. I wouldn't, there's all kinds of advantages here, but we need a cognitive leap to get there. And so depending on, who you talk to in the science community, anywhere from about 190 to 50,000 years ago, they say humans kind of gained cognition based on the quantity of their brain and how big their brains were and how developed the synapses were as they moved across. But one of the things that struck me, and it came to me in a vision, was if I was John Doe and I had just evolved out of Africa, I was still trying to figure out my cognition as to what everything meant. We know humans developed the ability to harness fire, particularly for cooking, at about 300,000 years ago. So it was just about 100,000 years before the AMH, or the anatomical modern human, came into existence. We developed this idea that we could create fire by striking two rocks together. As long as we had dry enough tinder, it would catch on fire and we'd be able to cook. And then I think about that man, and he's striking his fire. And if you've ever struck two stones together, you know that it throws a spark from the rock to the kindling, in which case it starts the fire. What would man have looked at when he saw lightning? He'd have thought it was the same thing on a grander scale, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he'd have said, if I strike these two rocks, I get this little bitty spark, and it goes down and it makes fire. If we're out here and the water's falling out of the sky, all of a sudden this spark from huge rocks, right? The thunder is the right striking. Here gets this lightning bolt that strikes the ground and starts a fire. The association then said, there must be me, supersized, striking much bigger rocks to get the lightning bolt.
Yeah.
And so if you follow that line of logic, this is where we see this idea kind of form. You kind of have to work through thousands of years before we get to a place where, in the case of the Altai, the steppes in Mongolia, where we start seeing shaman appear. And that was about 30 to 35,000 years ago ish. We start seeing shaman appear in Mongolia. And these were men, and they were essentially charged with kind of carrying on the ancient traditions. And that was kind of, and so everybody kind of referred to them to talk to the deity. And that was kind of how that began, that process of theological evolution kind of came to fruition. And we see it kind of continue to develop. I mean, I'm giving a synopsis.
You're still doing it today. You're continuing this ancient wisdom. And And this book sounds great. I mean, this is what we need. We've got to fight this materialistic message that's undermining our society. No, we need people like you to everyone in their different ways, pulling people from their area back into it. So this is brilliant.
Absolutely. Putting spirituality center.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
So where can people find more about you, and where will the book be available?
The book is coming out in early May. And it will be available wherever you get your books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those
Okay.
favorite bookstores. To get a hold of me or to learn more about me, you're welcome to visit my website. And that website is https://akulfhednar.com. And I'll spell it. AK is for Alaska, and then ULF as in Frank, HEDNAR.com.
Okay. I'll put a link in the show notes and
Perfect. And the podcast is available. It's dropped every Sunday mornings. It's available wherever you get your podcasts or your streaming. We're on Pandora and Stitcher and TuneIn and
what do you talk
any.
about? Do you have guests, or is it?
I do interview different individuals, and we haven't done too many. I've just kind of started more or less doing the interviews, but mostly it's been just my teachings of the things that I have been taught by what I refer to as the Lenvedi, who are the spirits of the land according to the Celtic Norse, and so that's the way they've identified themselves to me. So that's what I call them.
Wow.
And so and I try to pass along all the teachings they give me in
Okay.
these talks, and just kind of hopefully provide some enlightenment. For those individuals who also have the iPhone, there's a app called the Wisdom app. The Wisdom app, I can't even tell you the website, but if you can go there and look for Dr. Mark Weisman, and I do about 30 minutes a day where it's anybody wants to call in, and we talk about, typically it's following up from the weekend show, any questions that I've gotten in email or whatever. And then we open it up. Anybody who's on the Wisdom app can chime in, and we can get some real enlightenment.
All
That's
right.
my hope.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I'll put all those links in the show notes.
Perfect.
Nice.
So
Been great, Mark. Thanks very much.
absolutely.
Thanks for staying up so late for me.
Oh, I love it. I very much appreciate it. I love getting the word out, and I think the more people like yourself and certainly some of the others who have worked with me, the more you guys we get this word out. I think the more the word gets out, the more people are going to be intrigued, and the more people are intrigued, the more they'll come back and hopefully seek peace and community again.
Yeah,
So
that's what we need. It's what we're all sorely missing in this Zoom day and age.
I agree.
Let me just plug the book I mentioned, from Dr. George King, The 9 Freedoms. If you're looking for more reading material,
Very well.
the cosmic message, how we evolve into UFOs, the cosmic religion. So
I am making notes of it right now. The 9 Freedoms.
Yeah.
Okay. I will make a note. I will have to read this.
You're a scholar.
I am. I love learning. And it really gives us, I always speak of a parable, which I think is just so apt for modern day life, of 9 people standing around a puddle of water on the ground. And they're all looking at the puddle. We all have our perspective of the puddle, and we see what we see. It's right there in front of us. But the more we're willing to step to the right or step to the left and work our way around the puddle, the different perspectives we acquire of the puddle. And then when we get back to our original spot, we have a fuller view of the puddle. We know more about the puddle. But the next key ingredient to that is that we ask the person next to us what they see in the puddle.
Mm.
And we begin to this commonality.
Mm.
We start seeing our similarities, and we don't worry about the differences. And yes, they may see it differently because they've had a bad day or they've had a bad experience, maybe with puddles. And so their brain is wired a little differently because they have these emotions tied to it, and it's corrupted some of the memory. So they may have and so as we get more and more perspectives of the puddle, we're learning more not about the puddle, but our relationship to the puddle. And that, my friend, is where real wisdom arrives. And so, unfortunately, too many people put on their blinders, and all they want to see is their perspective of the puddle. They don't care about your perspective. Your perspective's wrong. So they just want to see their perspective.
The real puddle.
And yeah, and so I'm trying to get people to take those blinders down. That's the big one.
What a beautiful note to end on. Yeah. And maybe that's what God's doing. Maybe not that I know the mind of God. Maybe it split itself up so that it could see all around the puddle.
Agreed. And that's the greatest gift we can have and
Yeah.
give.
Yeah.
So excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jack.
My pleasure,
I
Mark.
thank you for your time, and I wish you great peace and success.
Thank you very much. Right back at you.
Okay. You have a nice evening, sir.
You too. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.